Carasoft Technology would like to welcome you to our Google Cloud webinar, Security Command Center Premium and Secure Data Environment with Burwood Group. At this time, I would like to pass it over to our speaker for today, Aaron Strong, Technical Architect, Cloud Services, Burwood Group. Aaron, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thanks, Molly. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, so my name is Aaron Strong. I'm a technical architect in our cloud services practice at the Burwood Group. I've been working with Burwood for the last 5 years, focusing really in the higher ed vertical. I've actually seen a couple of familiar faces that have come through this webinar, so it's fun to see familiar names, recognizable faces as they come through. I also, over those last 5 years, have been working in or focused more on like the infrastructure as code and how to deliver IAC through CI/CD type of processes. So real fast, what we'll cover today is I want to cover some of the security fundamentals and best practices. How does Burwood as a whole approach different cloud projects, and how are we mapping some of our initiatives back over to like well-architected frameworks? We'll review a couple of different case studies, and at the very end, we'll talk about the Security Command Center as an overview. But just a little bit about the Burwood Group as a whole. Burwood is an IT consulting firm that's been around for more than 25 years. Burwood Group is a GCP reseller, and we just won a couple of different awards from Google around the public sector. So big shout out to the team for winning those. Burwood as a whole, we also want to help clients optimize their current infrastructure assets, which includes like on-prem resources as well as hybrid solutions. We work with clients to help improve their application stack using current deployment methods. And our goal is to be your partner and to help your customers achieve better outcomes. So let's talk about the secure data environment and Burwood's approach. But before I get into that, I really want to talk about the fundamentals and the best practices and how we are able to incorporate those into our SDE blueprint, our deployment offering. So the very first thing is we feel that it's very important to codify your operations, meaning that we want to look at the operations, try to work through your workflows and through your processes and put those items into code. We feel like putting the processes and workflows in code help reduces mistakes. So instead of having a human go through like a run book, we want automation. We want, quote unquote, the robots to be able to run through the automation for us, because the automation is going to catch those, maybe like a prerequisites or permissions, etc. It's going to catch those items way before a human will catch those. A human can circumvent those or work around those. So we want to take that processes out of like an operator's hand and move that into a CI/CD type of process workflow. We also feel like coding your environment also helps minimize training requirements, both from like onboarding new employees or team members, but also sharing out like artifacts or readmes or documentation to other team members, because we are putting our workflows and processes in code. Others can now read that, get a better understanding of how an application or a piece of infrastructure is supposed to operate and function. We definitely try to incorporate and map back a lot of our design requirements to the well-architected framework. The well-architected framework, there's multiples of these. Each cloud provider has their own flavor of them, but essentially they all do the exact same. What we're trying to do here is categorize key areas, or sometimes they call them pillars of a cloud, public cloud environment. We want to make sure that we are hitting all the different areas in cloud to our design. So we want to make sure that we talk about resiliency, HA, security, automation as part of that, as well as like cost optimization. So we want to make sure that we talk through all those and map them back over to our well-architected framework. The next thing is a layered security approach. So, we want to make sure that there are different stop gaps throughout the like the infrastructure or from an application. An example is like a cloud storage bucket, as an example, to keep it simple. So we want to make sure that we are making sure that permissions are applied correctly, that the bucket itself is not exposed to the outside world, that the bucket itself is encrypted both at rest but also from a in-transit perspective. And then apply best practices using mapping back to the well-architected framework. I talked about least privileges, so I like to start at the lowest rung possible, things like a ladder. If we over-provision permissions, sometimes it's hard to retract those permissions once they've been given out. So start with pretty restricted permissions first, and then loosen up the controls as reasons come about. I talked about the automation and pipeline. So again, taking the infrastructure as code as an example, or even data pipelines, make sure that the operations, that's the biggest thing, is taking the operations, putting that into code, and then letting the system, whatever system you choose, to go ahead and deploy the infrastructure, deploy the application, setting up permissions. Let the systems do that for us and take more of the humans out of that equation. We also want to use, I see there's a question, but I think we're going to have questions at the end, just to give you a heads up. But thank you, hold that question. The other thing is use private workloads. So we don't want to expose compute to the public internet. So use private instances wherever possible. Front end those with like load balancers or other managed services. And the last one is setting up billing alerts. So that is one of the pillars. It's from like a cost optimization, but at the least, set up billing alerts. So that way your stakeholders are getting alerts when a specific project or resources start to spike and get out of hand. We need to be able to make sure that someone has visibility from a financial perspective and gets those type of alerts. And so a lot of that is we are using a lot of those foundations and best practices and then applying them to our secure data environment. This is our approach to an SD environment. So we want to make sure that we feel like creating a framework is the best way, because it gives us the flexibility to potentially expand or attract different areas within this environment. Allows us to then build and scale out and quickly redeploy if we ever need to, because in a lot of cloud environments, there's multiple environments now. There's like a dev or production type of environment. And so we will be able to reproduce those artifacts in multiple environment scenarios. This is a high level of our approach. This is like the logical design of an SD environment. What we're doing here is that we're able to break out the different components. So we're putting like some separation between data and compute as an example. So in this diagram here on the left-hand side is a landing zone. It's kind of what we're earmarking this. And this is where data comes into the environment. A lot of times that is just data itself. You could put compute in that, but again, this is why we use a framework, and for scaling purposes, maybe that we can do a landing zone for data, but then have another landing zone for compute. Compute could be anything from instances to even like a SQL database, but it's just a way to ingest data that's on the landing zone. Processing zone is, like it says, it's processing, it's compute. Again, we've broken this out from permissions perspective, but also to separate out data compute so that way we can scale this. So if we need additional projects or even to scale the compute itself, we have that flexibility of doing that. And then the curated zone is how we're able to then put data back out into the environment, so that way it's curated. maybe that's going through like a DLP scan or additional IAM permissions that are maybe more restrictive. Different options. Again, this is a framework, and the idea is that we can discuss this with you as a client. And then underneath of that is making sure that we're applying all those best practices throughout the build process of the SDE. So like identity access management, we will make sure that we're not over provisioning key areas. Maybe we're not using user identities. Maybe we're just using service accounts instead, and we're using service account as the permissioned endpoints to help move data across the different zones in the environment. And then from a logging, data quality, and data governance perspective, we're putting in the right constraints or put into the environment, because sometimes these are very high restricted areas. And then logging is key, making sure that every action is loggable, and then knowing where to send those logs. And then the very last is the consumers on the right-hand side. Who's going to access this? This could be additional third-party solutions. It could be even like dashboards from other providers. So again, it's a framework that allows us flexibility. In the end, it's going to look something similar to this. Again, it can scale in key different areas. That's why we broke this thing out. So each one of the orange boxes, think of that as a GCP project. So each one of them has its own identity boundary and resource boundaries inside of them. So we have the landing zone, the processing project. These are the different managed services that we earmark that we see a lot of times are being used for the SDE environment. And then how do we get that data out? I do want to make notes of the project on the left-hand side, kind of bottom left where it says admin project. That is where a lot of our code, our CI/CD pipelines are going to live. And that helps us provision out, if not one environment, potentially multiple environments, and then also manage the environment. What we like to use, so just kind of going up the ladder a little bit, is the Security Command Center. Security Command Center is a great tool. It provides that cloud native flexibility. It's a tool built inside of GCP. And if you're ever worrying about like scalability, it's the same tool that Google uses for Gmail. So if there's any anomalies happening within the environment, Security Command Center has the scalability to detect that. As an example is like crypto mining, that's the big one. The other one is maybe identities or keys that are outside of the environment. Security Command Center can see those anomalies and then bubble those up or send like an alert to the appropriate personnel. Threat intelligence. As we all know, Google is a global resource. A lot of times they're going to know about new vulnerabilities before we do. And because Security Command Center is a managed service, it will automatically get updated when those new anomalies are detected within the world. And make a note here of health analytic detectors. So these are, I almost think like probes, where SEC can do like an asset inventory of the environment. And there are two different flavors of SEC, a standard and a premium. Standard, you get like 19 of these health analytic detectors, and then premium, you get like 168, and they just keep on going. The other thing with SEC is that there is a dashboard for compliance. So if you need to make sure that your data sets are meeting a specific compliance requirement, the dashboard will give you a percentage of how close you are to that requirement, and then that way you can tweak the environments as needed. So I just want to cover a couple case studies. The first one is with the University of Wisconsin-Madison. UW, they wanted to implement some automated security controls that were required by the federal government for their PHI data sets. They needed controls to help address like their physical access, also their network access into the cloud environment. They wanted ways to process security and to ensure compliance or meeting different standards, when they're storing, sharing, and processing information within Google Cloud. So we, Burwood, helped. We worked with the central IT team, and we were able to map a lot of the Google Cloud data controls and user permission settings to establish a campus data classification and risk level. We did deploy Security Command Center Premium, just make note of that. And that helped us gain additional visibility from a like a compliance dashboard perspective, from a reporting really perspective. But it also allowed us to have additional monitoring, network activity, and also set up IDS into the environment. We did bake in security controls throughout the automated process. So that is, working with central IT, knowing what security requirements are needed, and then again talked about like a workflow and processes, putting that all into code, so that way it's documented and we know it's repeatable every time we want to redeploy a new project, a new SDE type of environment. And then UW-Madison then took that, like our projects and some of the deliverables from that, and then they were able to share that with the Red Cloud Consortium. Next is just another example here from a case study perspective. We worked with a top research university. They needed to ensure governance and standards for its cloud environment. So again, we used Terraform was the main tool that we used. Very similar to the UW-Madison. We worked with central IT teams, made sure that we captured a lot of their security requirements, put that into code. Their difference was instead of like an SD environment, they wanted to almost have like a project factory. So every time they deploy new projects, it's meeting specific requirements for each new deployment. So SEC, Security Command Center overview, just as a whole. So SEC gives you that central visibility into the security posture and the status of the environment. It gives us a way to surface vulnerabilities and malicious activities with ways to take actions against them. So from a central location, we can gain visibility into how the environment is doing with easy to read graphs. Everyone likes pictures, right? And so we are able to aggregate a lot of this data into some sort of report. We can then quickly discover if there are any misconfigurations in like our web applications, VMs, containers, identities, networks, and then take action upon those. Environments can be benchmarked to a set of industry standards like the CIS or government regulations such as PCI, NIST 853, and ISO 27001. The web security offering within Premium, that scanner can detect new public-facing web vulnerabilities deployed on the Google Cloud, including new vulnerabilities that the OWASP Top 10, which may include new cross-site scripting, clear text passwords, and outdated libraries. I mentioned this a little bit before. I've worked with clients where after we deployed SEC bubbled up some alerts saying that there were some leaked credentials. Someone had pushed in a API key into a public Git repository. And so they were able to help quickly remediate, know exactly what repo that key was in, thanks to SEC. There's also event threat detection, which reads the logs from cloud logging to help detect threats like brute force, SSH attacks, cloud IAM abuse, malware, and data exfiltration. We can integrate SEC with other Google services and even third-party services. For example, SEC can integrate into Cloud Armor. If you're not sure what Cloud Armor is, it is a Google managed service, specifically around the web application firewall, so a WAF. And that WAF sits right on the edge of the internet. And so it can detect if there are any new spikes from a vulnerability perspective, and then send those alerts to SEC. SEC can integrate with third parties as well. Some of the top hitters are going to be like Qualys, Chef Automate, and Prisma Cloud. You can also send your alerts Oh, so the idea is that you can then send these alerts to your third-party tools. So if you already have like an established Prisma Cloud, you only want one console, you can push this data into Prisma Cloud. So how does this all work? SEC comes in two different flavors, standard and premium. Standard is the free tier. We at Burwood highly recommend always turning on standard tier. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. If anything, you're going to get some extra visibility. When you do decide to turn on SEC for the very first time, just know that there are 5 additional rules or roles that you, the operator, will have to enable for yourself. And then what SEC does is, for the initial setup, is it walks you through a wizard. You can select what in the hierarchy where you want SEC to be deployed and to monitor. And at the very end, it deploys like a service account. And that service account does an asset inventory of the entire organization. Depending on the size of the organization, that asset inventory can take a couple days, or sorry, a couple hours or a day. So I always recommend turning it on and then wait 24 hours to come back and look at the new findings and start tweaking and making changes. Going back to the security health analytics, there's standard and premium. I just want to make sure that you know that there are 2 different versions. The nice thing with the standard is that you do get some low-hanging fruits health analytics, things like a public data set, or if there's an open firewall, that's all included under standard. But if you need to dig a little bit deeper and have more or finer grain alerts, thing like an admin service account, that's going to be covered under premium. That standard health analytics, there was 19 of those. Premium, there was like 160, and it just keeps on adding. This graph is just a feature comparison between standard and premium. We just talked about the health analytics. The next one is that second line. If you need reporting and like more auditing capabilities, that's definitely covered under the premium. When we do SDE environments with clients, we highly recommend using premium or a third-party tool, maybe like Prisma Cloud as an example, so you can meet those reporting requirements. I want to give you a couple just screenshots here from like what premium looks like. So compliance, I like this because it's easy to read. If you don't have premium enabled, you won't even see that compliance tab at the top. But once you are signed up for premium, you can then start seeing where your environment is hitting from a reports perspective. So here you can see like a CIS standards 1 and 2, where it's at. You can tweak that as you need. But if you're more interested in government-related compliance, so like from a NIST 853, ISO 27001, those are all here. Over on the right-hand side, you can see there's an export button. So if you need to integrate this with other SIM tools, you can do that, but you just got to make sure that those SIM tools can use like message queues to be able to pull in this data. Just additional premium features. I talked about the export, the cloud monitoring. The one at the very bottom is that you do get early access and preview. So as new things do come out, premium customers are the first ones to get those. Molly, I think there might be some questions.
Yeah. Our first question here asks, do security with GCP follows CCPA and GDPR certifications?
Ooh, that's a good question. Is that in the chat by any chance?
Yes.
Okay. CCPA and HD. Oh, yes. So I know the GDPR, it does. I'm not familiar with the CCPA, but the GDPR, yes. So if you want to regulate where your data is being provisioned, there are organization policies that you can constrain, like what region or even what like data center, what zone you want that data to be put into.
Our next question asks, what assets are in the asset inventory?
Good question. So if you're using standard as an example, a lot of the, I wouldn't say standard, but like project owner IAM permissions, compute, networking, those will all be bubbled up and and contained under the asset inventory. But if you need additional like security scans from a container perspective, those are also included, but that is in the premium tier.
What SIEM tools can I integrate with SCC/SDE?
Yep. So I've worked with a lot of the, I guess, more popular SIM tools. I do want to note that Google does have their own SIM tool called Chronicle. So that's a managed service. SCCM plugs in very nicely into Chronicle. But again, if you've already established your skill set in a different SIM, things like ArcSight, Splunk, QRadar, I think there's another one I can't remember, but it's a lot of the major SIM tools out there it does integrate with.
Next question. Also, can we delegate SCC responsibilities to division and departments with our enterprise and make them responsible for monitoring their own environments?
Yes, you can. So if you need to delegate access down to either like a folder level or to a project level, SCCM does allow you to do that. The other nice thing about SCCM too is that not only from a delegation perspective, but if you only want to have specific services like those health analytics probes that or health analytics that I was talking about, and you only want that on a specific folder or project, you can do that versus maybe that's like a development project, but you need more visibility in like a prod environment. You can turn on additional services like the web security and event security analytics. So you do have flexibility.